The voice you choose for your AI assistant is really one of the most important things to get right, but it's also where I see a lot of people going wrong. The voice sets the tone for the conversation and can either make your agent feel very real and engaging or very robotic. In this video, we'll look at the different text-to-speech providers that you can choose inside Vapi. I'll share 3 things that you need to consider when choosing your agent's voice, and I'll also give you a full list of my favorite voices and what I think they work best for. Okay, so inside your Vapi dashboard, you're going to go to the tab Voice, and this is going to be where you start to configure your agent's voice. Vapi currently has 10 different providers, so there's a lot to choose from, but 2 of the main factors you're going to look at initially are cost and latency. So under cost here, you can start to see how the cost per minute is made up. So a lot of this is going to be your Vapi fixed costs. Then you have your transcriber, then you have the model that you're using, and then finally here you have your voice. So anywhere where you see TTX or text to speech, you know that's your voice. So with the cost, you're really looking for a price to quality ratio. How realistic does your voice sound for the price that you're willing to pay? And I think it's always better to lean more towards quality voice and pay that little bit extra because it'll make a real difference to how your agent sounds. Second factor you're going to look at here is latency, and latency just means speed. So you really want to aim for faster response times because this will really make your agent feel more natural, the conversation will flow. So you want to aim for lower latency, but as we'll look at in a few seconds, there's not actually that much difference between the different providers. Okay, so balancing the cost and the latency is really a crucial part of choosing the right voice. But because there are so many different providers available in Vapi, I thought it would be helpful to actually map them out and show you how each of them compare. So you can see in green, we have the cost per minute, and there is a lot of variance between the different costs here. But in purple, we have latency, so the actual speed of the voice. So right at the top, you have Tavis, which I haven't actually used, but when I looked into it, it looked like it was more focused on video. So that would explain why the cost is so high and also why the latency is extremely high. As we get down here, you can see right around like 11 labs, the voice is slightly higher than others. Latency is also slightly higher. This is probably one of the ones that I would recommend the most realistic voices. So therefore you're paying a little bit more and the latency is a little bit higher. But as we go down, you can see the cost starts to reduce. So Cartesia, it's like 2 cents per minute, right down to Azure and Neats, which are less than 1 cent per minute, or just over 1 cent per minute. OpenAI, although the cost is very low, it does have a very high latency, so it's going to slow down the response times. So really, it gets into how much you want to pay for quality. And then after that, there's not too much variance in terms of latency. So in this graph here, you can kind of see that. I've also added it to the board, which I'll include in the link below. So you can start to really compare, okay, how much am I willing to spend for the quality voice, and then how much latency will that cost? So overall, as I mentioned, one of the best voices I've found, most realistic, greatest selection is definitely 11 Labs. They have a slightly higher cost, slightly higher latency, but overall, I think if you're aiming for quality voice, realistic, this is the best provider to go for. If you're focused on just speed and you want a fast voice, Azure and Rhyme AI are definitely the fastest. And then in terms of cost, Azure is the cheapest. Okay, apart from cost and speed, what else should you start to consider when choosing a voice? There's definitely a few things I'd recommend that you think about. First of all, who is the target audience of your assistant? Who's actually going to be engaging with it? This will really tell you a lot about how the voice should sound. So think about their age, think about their demographics, and also what would be expected for this use case. As an example, like a dental clinic, something that's quite formal and articulate will work perfectly for that use case, but something a little bit more warmer and expressive might be needed for, let's say, a cold caller for a real estate agency. So I think it's really important to think about who the target audience is, who are you building this for, who's going to be using it, and that will tell you a lot about the type of voice that you want to select. Next, you want to look at tone and emotion. So the real way to find this out would be actually to engage with the voice and play it. So you want to choose a voice that actually has a range of emotions. Does it sound empathetic? Can it handle excitement or seriousness? And this will really make your AI feel a lot more engaging and human. And then finally, naturalness. This is really important. I find a lot of the voices that you can choose, they're maybe more suited towards audiobooks or advertisements, so they can sound very exaggerated or just a little bit too fake. So you want to focus on a voice that sounds natural. If people are calling it up, it should feel like a natural conversation. It should feel like a different human on the other end of the phone, even though it is an AI. So you want to avoid sounding too robotic. You want it to sound natural, and this will really improve the conversation flow. So as I said here at the end, it does have some very realistic voices, but you just really need to spend some time to find them. If you want to speed that up and maybe skip some of that, I've actually laid out some of my favorite voices here. As you can see, these are all by the provider 11 Labs, which I've already spoken about. I do feel like these are the most engaging and most authentic voices. Some of the other ones, they're a little bit slow. There's some background noise. They don't sound quite right. So I would definitely recommend checking out 11 Labs. And if you want to choose some of the voices that I've recommended here, I've given you the name that you can search for. I've included the accent, so depending on where you're building this, you might want to have a local accent, and also some recommendations in terms of use case, what I feel these voices would work best for. So this first one, Emily, is a really great voice, and I've used it to build a customer feedback assistant. So you could maybe look at the different use case that you're building for and then choose a voice. Okay, so heading back over to Vapi, we'll have a look at some of the additional settings that you can use to make your AI agent sound a lot more natural and a lot more engaging. First of all, if you choose a provider like OpenAI, you'll see you have a limited amount of options here. You can control the background noise, you can control filler injection, and then you have control over speed. But you don't really have a lot of control over how the voice sounds with a provider like OpenAI. If we want to switch to 11 Labs, you can choose a model. I would recommend 11 Turbo V2. And now if we scroll down again, you can see we actually have a lot more settings to choose from here. Now the trick here is really to experiment and talk to your assistant and find the right settings for the specific voice. But you can choose from some background noise. So if you want to have an office noise in the background, you can choose it there. You can include filler injection and back-channeling, which are like small phrases or words that the AI will insert into the conversation to make it feel a little bit more natural. The next three, stability, clarity, and similarity, and style exaggeration, are all to do with how expressive and the variance in the tone of the voice. So you want to adjust these settings depending on what voice you're using. For stability, I would go somewhere around the middle, maybe slightly more to the left if you want more variety. For clarity and similarity, you want to go as high as possible without getting any breaks or artifacts in the sound. So maybe 0.7 is good. For style exaggeration, you do want some exaggeration. So I would recommend between 0.2, 0.3 maybe. You don't want to go too high here because it will start to mess with your latency. And then finally, if we head over to the advanced tab, we actually have a couple of more settings here which give us more control over how the AI can manage the conversation. So first of all, we'll go to start speaking plan. So this is the number of seconds that the AI should wait before it starts speaking. Again, you're going to have to play around with this, but I think 0.5 seconds is pretty good. You can also turn on smart endpointing, or if you want more control, you can actually turn it off and configure these settings yourself. But I think it's pretty good with smart endpointing on. It can start to identify the ends of sentences and find where it should start speaking again. So I would recommend turning that on. Next, we have stop speaking plan. So this is to do with interruptions and how the AI should manage those situations where someone is talking over them. So this is the number of words the customer has to say before the AI will stop talking. So if it's 1, if the user says okay, the AI will just continue. But if it's okay, I need to, or more than 2 words or 3 words, the AI will actually stop talking. So I think 2 or 3 works pretty good here. You don't want the AI to stop talking if the person has just said yes or is agreeing with them as they're talking. And the same for voice seconds. So how many seconds does the person have to speak before the AI will stop talking? And then once the AI has been interrupted, how long will it wait before it starts talking again? So these settings are kind of helpful just to make the conversation a little bit more natural and find the right point for the AI to respond and start talking. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful. To recap what we've kind of gone over today, it's really to start about understanding who your audience is, who's going to be interacting with this agent, and then understanding what voice suits that use case. Then we looked at the different providers that you can choose from in Vapi. You need to look at the price, you need to look at the quality, and I would recommend going into the voice library, selecting a provider that you're happy with, and then going through each of the voices and testing them out to see if they work for your use case. Some providers have test snippets that you can actually test out directly in the voice library. Some don't, so you might actually have to add them to your system and talk to them. But I definitely recommend spending some time getting the voice right. It'll make such a difference to your agent in the end. And then those additional settings that we looked at, those small details in how the AI responds, but also in its voice variants, they can really make a difference to how your agent responds and how natural the conversation sounds. So I hope you found this video useful, and see you in the next one.